Hello, everyone. My name is Mansi Vora. I'm the VP of Strategy and Operations at a company called Skynet Labs, where we are focused on building decentralized data storage and just heavily focused on privacy and data sovereignty. I'm also the founder of Women in Blockchain Boston, which is an initiative to increase diversity in the crypto space and reduce barriers to entry. So one of the things that we launched last year is a beginner's guide to blockchain. So if any of you are new to the space and want to learn, I think that's a good starting point. And that's me. I would like to pass on to Tessie, who's one of our speakers today. And as you all introduce yourself, I would love to hear just a quick intro, but also your background and your vision when it comes to DeFi.
Hello. Thank you, Manasi. And my name is Tessie Merain. I am the co-founder of Liquality, which is incubated at Consensus. Consensus is the biggest blockchain engineering company there is. And Liquality is an unintermediated wallet that also has the ability to swap. So basically you have a decentralized exchange in a multi-crypto wallet. So you can hold and you can swap in the wallet. So talking about DeFi, I'm in the middle of that. I also started Women in Blockchain in 2016. And my vision in general is that I'm working on enabling people on both sides, right? On the quality with the technology, and on the Women in Blockchain side with enabling people, training them, educating them, and enabling them in participation in the digital economy, so that they can secure and easy, act across the globe. And so that's it. That's me. And I'm giving it on to Tavana.
Hi there. I was just making sure my kids don't come crashing the party. Hi. I'm Tavana Evans, and I'm the founder of WildCoin. I've been a technologist for 25 years, from engineering to marketing and data science as of recently. I have my vision for DeFi is to make this thing as simple as possible so we can get other folks involved, and equally exciting in terms of what it has to offer, and in terms of solving problems, financial issues that touch everybody across the globe. I'm always about simplifying this space, and bringing this information to the grandmothers, the mothers, et cetera, that really could benefit, but they're not technologically savvy, or they're not technologists. This technology is for the people, and the people need to be able to understand. They need to know about it, for one. They need to understand the basics of it, and they need to have adequate access to these resources. And that's what I'm about.
Thank you, Tavana. I'll pass it on to Jenny.
Hey guys, my name is Jenny Leung. I'm an attorney at Quetzal. We're a boutique law firm based in New York and DC, and we focus primarily on blockchains, cryptocurrencies, my vision for DeFi, I think, is really to create an alternative to traditional financial markets. I think it's important that we remove frictions when we have access to financial services in this increasingly borderless world.
Amazing. Donna, do you want to go next?
Hi, after some technical faux pas. So I've been in and around financial services and angel investing and teaching at law schools, at business schools for quite some time. I chaired the commodity exchange. I think I was the first woman to chair a U.S. exchange, and was for a period of time managing director of the World Economic Forum, most noted for their Davos. I think that blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies is just an amazingly exciting area. I think it levels a lot of the playing fields for women. And our job is to make sure that they get access to it, that they know how to use it, and that it improves their lives in every single way, financially, which then empowers them for every other kind of aspect of life. So I think that's a little brief summation of what we hope to achieve in the coming years.
And last but not the least, Maggie, if you were not in the previous session, Maggie did an intro to DeFi, but no worries if you missed that. We will definitely cover some base here in this panel and dive a little detail. Maggie, take over.
Hi, so nice to be here with everybody. My name is Maggie Love, and I am co-founder and director of business development for a crypto company called Web3 Cloud, and we focus on building the infrastructure for the compute and storage layers of the decentralized web. And I'm also the founder of SheFi, which is an educational initiative for women on decentralized finance that also doubles as a vehicle to donate funds to organizations that educate women in STEM programs. And so my vision, and the vision that SheFi's vision as well, is that there is a financial economy built on Web 3.0 in which women are active participants and leaders, therefore creating a more inclusive, diverse, and sustainable industry. And so we have about 60 women going through SheFi right now, learning foundational DeFi projects, and we'll get into more advanced topics later on. And I'm just really excited because we have a very diverse group represented from all over the world, and we're bringing a lot of really smart women into the space that weren't in it before.
Thank you, all panelists. I think the title of today's talk is DeFi Bits, Bots, and PowerPlay, but I think I can safely say we have a powerhouse of women leaders right here. And the vision that each of you mentioned, it's amazing. Because essentially this technology is meant to empower people, and some of the conversation today that we're going to be talking about is, does it do that as of now? Is it going to be doing that in the future? And what are some of the challenges, obstacles, and opportunities? So just setting the context for today's conversation, where we're going to be talking about DeFi and just financial inclusion, I wanted to highlight the survey that we did along with another organization where we researched 60 different women across the world, across 25 different countries, and how they were using crypto as of today. And there were some really interesting stats that came across through that survey. One of them was the biggest, I think, interesting stat was that a resounding 70% of the respondents, and these are all women respondents across multiple different emerging and developed countries, responded that they would prefer to be paid in crypto. And also 72% indicated that they have more than 25% of their portfolio currently in digital assets. So while there needs to be more diversity in the crypto space, already there are women who are involved in the crypto space and doing various different things. And it's just a matter of highlighting them. But with that kind of context, Donna, I want to start with you and setting the stage for what is CeFi, which is centralized finance, and what is DeFi, and what are these differences that we are going to be talking about today?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes confusing to have these little brief words like CeFi and DeFi because, a lot of people are not, immersed in all of the lingo. So CeFi stands for centralized finance. Centralized finance is something that we've all been experiencing, but let me just start with some of these slides to make it easier. So centralized finance, you can trace it back to the 1400s. And then modernized finance, you can trace to the 1800s. You can click on Google and you can find out many relating to this. What are the characteristics of some of these centralized finance? It would be a trusted third party, a bank, an exchange that you hand over your money to. It's centralized. There are layers of intermediaries. You want to buy a stock, you call a broker, you do this, you do that, and then you don't even really get the stock in your hands. It's highly subject to regulations. What are the shortcomings? One of them is systemic impact. If something goes down, it could go domino effect across many things. delayed settlement. We saw that recently for any of you that were following what went on in the US and GameStop, just amazingly interesting. And that much of the congestion and the problems and the disputes happened because it took 2 days in which to settle the money and the securities. So examples of some of the above are in the late 90s, we had the dot-com bust. In 2008, because of all of the mortgages and then packaging and reselling them, we had a crash. And then, as I just mentioned, GameStop. We can contrast this with decentralized finance. Decentralized finance started with Bitcoin in 2009. I mean, really decentralized finance. And that you can avail yourself of the white paper, lots and lots of resources around that area to familiarize yourself. Then Ethereum, which layered a different approach, which was with smart contracts and is the basis for decentralized finance, that began in 2014. So we have more than a decade of Bitcoin, and we're getting close to almost 8 years on Ethereum. What are the characteristics as opposed to in centralized finance? We have no centralized party, we hope. We'll check that out for you. Is it trustless? It's open source, meaning that the code can be replicated and it's automated through smart contracts. So you don't have to rely on a lot of third parties. It's heavily shortcomings. Some people say it's heavily reliance on Ethereum, and sometimes that the prices to transacted get a little tough and a little high for people. It is a complete trust on coders, but the coders are creating the smart contracts, and we have more and more people that are vetting and verifying them. There is a concentration of people who are what we call whales, meaning big investors, and also investors that came into various kinds of protocols and remain invested in them. There's some regulatory uncertainty around the world, especially in the United States, but we hope that with our new SEC chairman, that he will clarify much of this, as well as with the other regulatory agencies globally. These are just some of on both the centralized and the decentralized finance, some of the categories. So we have money, of which we know exists in both the centralized and the decentralized world. Here are some of the symbols on the decentralized: Bitcoin, DAO, and Ethereum. We have centralized banking, commercial banking, and investment banking. Both have a presence in the centralized and the decentralized finance. So much of what you were paying high fees for or couldn't get access to are being replicated with easier access, lower barriers to entry, and lower fees. We also have exchanges, brokerage, insurance, payments. Anybody in remittances will be very happy to know about the payments, where the fees are substantially lower and the settlement is really, really fast. And that's great for people that send money all over the world for their families. Again, we're seeing asset management develop in the decentralized world, again, at much lower cost and much lower barriers of entry.
Thank you, Donna, for walking us through that ecosystem of centralized applications, or what our current financial infrastructure looks like versus the DeFi or decentralized financial. And I do want to dig into something you mentioned about, the benefits or characteristics of the DeFi world are trustlessness, lower fees, and there's this strong narrative in the DeFi ecosystem that it's going to bank the unbanked. What I want to ask, everyone on the panel today is this narrative far from what reality is? Where are we seeing in terms of financial inclusion where are we seeing DeFi to be in terms of financial inclusion?
And then let everyone go. We're still in the big experimental stages. We're in the beta. So we are testing, and we're making sure that everything is working and that it will be ready for prime time, as we would say. And so I think that what we want to do is get out all of the literally bugs in the smart contracts, get out all of the crinking and clinking that needs to be done when something is new, and make sure that it is seamless, and also that it is affordable when it rolls out to the more generalized public, including the people that really need to be banked, and have all of this available to them at really good cost and with an array of products that they would never normally have any access to.
Did anyone else? Tessie, I think you're on mute if you're speaking.
I heard that in a long time. I totally agree with Donna. That's totally true. We're in very beginnings. It's kind of like the Wild West. And in some ways that's good, and sometimes it's not so good. Let's start with the not so good part maybe, and the not so good part might be that some people who try out DeFi get hurt because they lose money, right? On the other hand, it is a great opportunity. So we have to, we really have to kind of zoom out and look at this new field in a new way, right? And for that, you really have to play around, and you really have to bring in new people who don't have the knowledge of the old banking, and just go for it and do something very different. And of course, there will be money lost, and it's really important that people do. And on the other hand, if you don't do this, so right now we are probably in a phase where we take like the old legacy banking and put it on a new technology. That's one big trend, right? And actually we put it on steroids, and then we let people who have like never touched it, they're actually too young to get a loan, play with that, so that is a little bit recipe for a disaster. On the other hand, it's great that, we don't, for innovation, we need to have this kind of a space so that we come up with new regulations even. Because if we would use the old regulation, we would kind of force it into the old framework, right? And so, so I'm all for it. You also mentioned whether it will be banking the unbanked. There are 1.7 billion people unbanked today. And we should look at why they are unbanked. What are the requirements that make them unbanked? One being like a registered ID. So, for example, in DeFi, registered ID isn't, it's decentralized finance. There's nobody asking you for your ID. And so there are so many things. If we can break down, bank as trust authority, who's a accredited investor, all these kind of like narratives that we had in the previous system, then we can come to innovation, and we can really change something and make it safe and secure and fun, and really allow anybody to come into this space.
Jenny, I see you are unmuted. Did you want to chime in?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what Donna and Tessie said. I think today where we are, it's kind of like the equivalent of hiding cash under our beds because we don't yet trust the bank. And I think that's fine. There might be good reasons today why we don't trust it completely, but that's why you don't put your entire life savings today, right? I think we're not yet at the point where I can confidently tell my mom to put all her savings in crypto and literally DeFi, but I think one day when it happens, we'll look back and we think, wow, like why didn't we do that? Like now is the time. So I think it's not that easy. It will take some time, but we'll definitely get there.
Yeah, I think it's like approaching, just to summarize what the three of you said, there's definitely the motivation, and the narrative talks to the motivation of being able to empower people. But I think there's a long path for us to achieve that. And I think that leads into my second question for you guys is, what are some of the current challenges that we are seeing to kind of that adoption, or even from an infrastructure standpoint, like on-ramps, off-ramps into the DeFi ecosystem? What are some of the obstacles to the visions that you kind of highlighted in your introduction?
To take a stab at first. I mean, I do think it's quite complicated. I mean, a lot of people that aren't super great at computers and at technology, it still needs to be streamlined for them. And that is, at present, I think it's a kind of it's a barrier for people that don't have that confidence. But I do think that all of these approaches will become much easier, and they'll become normalized. And therefore, it will be not a big deal. I mean, they'll just be able to download something on their telephone. They'll have a good security system, and they'll be able to do that in the same way that they do emails and online banking now. 10 years ago, people would have said, oh my God, I'll never be able to do that. But, now they do it, it's second nature. So I think it will be the same thing. And so the adoption will be streamlined, and then people will use it.
I think one of the barriers to entry is there's so much happening and there's so much information, and it's sometimes hard to know where to start, which is why the links Mansi is sharing with the Beginner's Blockchain Guide is good. And I do think we've made a lot of progress. Like, it used to be like UX, UI, that's all you hear at crypto conferences, terrible UX, terrible UI. And I think we're getting there, but I think it does come with a little bit of needing to talk through, what it really means to custody your own funds, or, what it means to lend into like a liquidity pool, right? I'm already using a lot of jargon here. So if you're new to blockchain and crypto, you're like, where do I begin? But I will say what I'm learning through SheFi is I had a whole brand new cohort. When I say brand new, I mean new to crypto. I started last fall, and we had practice sending transactions using different wallets to each other and accessing some of the platforms. And it's honestly clicking with so many of them. Then they'll ping me a week later and be like, okay, I went on Uniswap and did this, and we haven't even covered decentralized exchanges yet, right? So it's really, I do believe we're at a point, if you just get people comfortable with some of the innate blockchain parts of it and drills home some of the really important things about private keys and keeping your assets safe. Technology is becoming second nature, and we're seeing a lot of mobile first platforms such as Cello, these Argent, like mobile first wallets. And I do think it's just about getting people to the starting point, and then they can figure out where to go from there. So, it's a lot of information, but if you can help curate where people need to go by providing different types of resources, then they're gangbusters. So I think it's challenging, but I think there's a lot of great things happening as well.
Yeah, and I think Maggie touched on being comfortable as well. That's a big one. It's also sort of learning to trust the technology, and it's a little difficult when every now and then you see headlines of another smart contract being hacked. I think 2020 was one of the biggest years for DeFi, but also one of the, in some ways, most difficult years in terms of the amount of exploits and hacks and that happened during that year. So I think it's going to take time, but also to develop that trust and for the security and for the code to become more secure.
Yeah, and I think I'll pass it on to Tavana, but I also want to highlight, just UX, UI, UX barriers, or even educational barriers. There's something to talk about, behavioral changes and generational changes that are coming into place when we talk about DeFi. So do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to talk about, educational and generational. This is the time where the creators, the developers that speak the language of those that are already divided in a digital divided need to be there, be here, creating that bridge to those people. Because what I find is it's almost like the only term I can think of to really describe it outside of techie terms is maybe like love languages. Well, this is money languages, or how we deal socially. And there needs to be people who speak the language of the people who are divided from this technology, and in place and working with building these systems, if it's truly going to be equitable and benefit others out there. For instance, what I found in Guapcoin in dealing with the Black community is that we're more people-based. And we force people-based, we force relationships. We have to see someone has to be accountable. We have to talk. We're not, and then moving over to something that is purely software and software-based and technology-based, and there's no customer service and there's no person on the other end that you can identify with or communicate with. That's a huge barrier. So, we have to look at issues like that and solve problems like that as well to bring a more human element to this technology.
And I am glad we like come with some of the challenges that this technology face, but there's a ton of potential as well. So I do want to flip to the other side of the conversation where, as women of color, we've chosen to be in this industry because there's so much potential and there's a lot of impact to be made. I do want to hear from all of you. What are some of these opportunities and what are some of the ways others can kind of join this DeFi revolution, if I may call it?
I'll take that one. So the opportunities, and I'm looking at this from a lot of different angles because I'm a builder, right? So I have a company, and one of the changes too is not just having a new paradigm, and that is the difficulty. It's not just the UI, but it's a mental difference, right? It's a new paradigm. People have to think about this differently, and so they will be empowered. So the big promise that I see is really in the shift of agency that we create by creating this technology, right? And so also what Women in Blockchain has as a goal is to create those people, right? I mean, they're not just born. We're all born with there's the bank, and we go there, and there's the cash machine, and there's a customer service, and so and those systems, they have kind of become very inflated, and they haven't really worked for everybody, right? Obviously, there are lots of people not banked, but also during the 2008 financial crisis, and I'm just talking for the US, there was predatory lending, all these kind of things, right? So if we want to create inclusive systems in order to shift that agency, you can't just build technology, right? Because if it's built without a purpose, it will go somewhere else, right? Because if there is no goal, then it's not going to happen, right? That's one. And then if the experts are not there, then it will all go somewhere else too, right? And the experts, right now, it's like, here are the builders and here are the experts, right? In most cases, because the countries, the global south, that will have the most use cases for, financial inclusion, because they're not included, they are not connected quite yet to the technology and to the building. And so right now, it's so important to bring everybody in, bring minorities in, because we already have a white man's world. And I always say, I like white men. There's nothing wrong with white men, but it's something that it works a certain way, right? And there are the women, and the women have approaches, and there are different cultures, and they're all different approaches. And if we do this together, this world will be smarter. The next world will be smarter. We can collaborate on things, right? And we have to, because otherwise our products won't be robust, but also we might just put it all on the smart contracts, the reward systems. The downside of that could be, the other side of the promise is that it could actually work totally against us. So we really have no choice but to get in there and bring everybody with us in tremendous speed. It's urgent, right? Because we don't want the legacy world baked into smart contracts and function automatically without us even knowing what's happening, right? And that's already happening a lot in the current world.
Yeah, and I think just adding to that, it's not just about whether this is a moral thing or an ethical thing to do in terms of including diversity. It just makes business sense. You are ignoring a huge untapped market if you're ignoring 50% of the world population, or if you're ignoring certain continents altogether when you're building these technologies. I want to hear from others as well in terms of opportunities that they are seeing and how people can get involved in the crypto space. But also, I know we are coming close to the end of our panel. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat, or you can request to come on stage and we would be happy to take them live as well.
Waiting for a question, I would say that everybody on the stage here represents an opportunity. We all were doing something that was, in our core competency. Of course, we were doing things that Jenny was doing law, and Tessie was doing technology. And we gravitated to a new paradigm. And interestingly, you could rise to the top very quickly because, the whole thing started back in 2000 and the end of 2008. So if you stayed home, which we all are home, if we stayed home and read and got some other women to help tutor you, you could be, knowledgeable in a relatively fast time. Not saying that there isn't, like Maggie said, something new going on every single day. But I do think that this is a situation where especially women can read, learn, and excel very quickly in their area of expertise. And so if that's the approach you want to take, you can do it that way. And the other way, of course, is the way we were talking about, where people can invest and get access to different kinds of instruments that would give them a lot of differentiation that they wouldn't have been able to have in the centralized finance world.
And I guess while we wait for questions, I can continue asking questions that I have for the panelists. I did want to, probably, Jenny, you mentioned trust as a component, and that's a really good point. It's it's a function of trust right now. You trust your bank versus being able to trust these smart contracts or these really, like Tessie mentioned, Wild West products that are out there, and that leads into the conversation of regulation. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think
should.
I was going to say, I think the more decentralized something is, the harder it is to build trust. I think because there's no CEO, there's no one with fiduciary duty to protect the interests of the platforms. And as you said, banks are trusted because they're highly regulated. They're backed by insurance, the faith of the government, the ability to collect taxes. But yeah, I think with regulation, it can also both inhibit and help the acceptance of DeFi. There's in a way to say there's a tension between DeFi and regulations, because DeFi doesn't discriminate between the rich, the poor, the young. It doesn't care. But it also doesn't discriminate between terrorists and money launderers and scammers and hackers, which means that regulators are going to have a very strong eye on these platforms, as well as the on and off ramps used to sell and buy crypto. And I know this isn't limited to DeFi. You can't stop criminals using the internet, the telephone, text messages. And I bring this up because as lawyers, when we interact with regulators, we can't just point our fingers and say, oh, but they're doing it too, so why can't we? But regulation could also build trust in a way. I think it's interesting in the crypto space, you have two types of people. Ones that think, they can't be regulated because they're decentralized, and others, they want to be regulated because being licensed, being registered, being subject to examinations give platforms that perceive angle of legitimacy.
Maggie, do you have a contradictory point of view? I know you might have some opinions if you want to chime in.
I'm hoping, I don't think there needs to be like a conflict between regulation and the wild west of decentralize everything, global money. It is, global money is probably scary for a lot of nations. Like, they're excited about it, but it's something that challenges power. So, and institutions, and disrupts. And we're all just yeah, global money. It's these people are wait, part of our world power is how strong our currency is, right? So there's obviously going to be this tension between people that are decentralized finance, everything, Bitcoin, everything, be able to buy a US dollar backed stable coin because your own currency is so hyperinflated. That's a level of taking back power for people that a government can't control. So I can see why in many areas, there's this tension. It's hard when I see uninformed tweets. I actually think one of the some important New York, I think the AG, she tweeted something about coming down on Bitcoin if you're not using it right. And that's what stresses me out more, because we do actually have on this panel so many informed women. We have so many people in this space who are so informed and could really impact positive policies for cryptocurrency. And that's us trusting that whoever that people empower what cryptocurrency? There's so many dynamics at play, right? That's like questioning 4D chess sometimes. But I really do think there could be smart regulation. We just have to make sure we're voting for people that understand cryptocurrency and its benefits and all the things it can enhance in our institutions and our economies. And yeah, so I'm not against it. I hope it's smart. And I unfortunately still seeing bad takes.
Yeah. In terms of regulations, I'm not against regulations as well, but I've noticed a problem when it comes to regulations. What you have is that you have these new industries that come up. You have people who benefit totally. And then regulation comes in, clamps down, and the people who come behind, and there's now an inequality that exists now. You already have the people who benefited and weren't under the tight regulatory structure. And now you have new people that come in who are supposed to benefit off of this new system. And they're, pretty much choked up and they can't do. We've seen this during the ICO era. During the ICO era, you had all of these people that, all of these companies that did ICOs and raised all of this money, where there were other companies. I'm sorry, I'm here.
No worries. This is the Zoom life.
Yeah, I know, right? But you have but at any rate, during the ICO era, you had who came in and said, wow, this is a great way for us to be able to raise funds for our company, like women-owned companies, like Black women-owned companies that traditionally don't get funding. They don't get VC funding. They don't get funding. So now here's a way where you could potentially raise money for your solutions in your company. But now we're heavily regulated. It's a no to these ICOs. And
I 100% disagree with you. That is like flat out incorrect. There is a law about raising money in the securities regime. Every ICO that did it incorrectly. And the fact that finally the government came in and said, this is not correct, does not mean that the women were closed out later on. The people that did it took advantage of a first mover and did something that was not in accordance with the rules. So ICOs created a terrible black stain on the crypto community for quite some time because many of them were scammed and people lost a lot of money. There is zero benefit from an ICO.
Coming from an industry where, again, we don't get funded, we don't get VC funding. I know of a project, particularly that was able to raise money, and they were not a scam, like Patientory.
Okay, but
this was a company. This was a Black woman-owned company, and she was able to raise.
Yes,
she was able to raise.
That's wonderful.
The funding to do her company.
I'm sorry to mention on the panel, but I know
I applaud everybody that can raise money, and I think there should not be color or sex associated with the ability to raise money. But I think you have to do it under a regime that is legal, irrespective of whether or not it is a cool new thing to do. So
I understand. I understand. It's not that I'm against regulations. What I'm referring to is when the regulations get too stringent on the people who are already totally unabridged from the process, because now what you have is, again, typical regulations require you to register, they require you to pay large fees, which if they're raising money to bring their company out there, obviously they're not in the position to be able to raise large fees in order to register and in order to obtain the legal support in order to do so. So there's a lot of barriers when it comes to that. And again, if you're trying to raise money and you have to become regulation ready, but you have to raise money to become regulation ready, there are problems there.
But we should talk offline because I'm an angel investor. We raise money all of the time. There are so many platforms for startups to be able to raise money in a legal fashion. There's no reason for anyone to have to resort to illegal securities in contravention of securities laws and get themselves potentially in trouble. These laws have existed. The fact that people skirted underneath the wire and didn't pay attention to them and got away with it doesn't mean, in fact, that we should go down that path. So there are lots of opportunities. I'm happy to discuss them offline with anybody, but we have to do it in a compliant way. And there are many crowdfunding sources now for startups that don't have to go through huge amounts of money to be compliant. So I think that has all changed, and the SEC has actually tried to change much of that in the last year.
Yeah, I think I love this tension, and if we had more time, we could have continued talking about this. But I know, Tessie, you had one quick point you want to make. If you can keep it quick,
I think we have till 7:30 actually.
Oh, I thought it was 7:15.
No, we have to till 7:30. Yes, I mean, I thought that was really interesting actually, and I agree with both of you. One being, yes, 2017. Definitely. And I want to clarify one thing before I even say anything else. Wild West is not necessarily a bad thing. I was talking about uncharted territory. So that's all, like, you can create something, but you can also, lose. So, what Tavana said, speaks to something else, right? I understand, yes. So I'm against all these criminal activities that some people did knowingly. It was just like, well, we can make money, we can just print money, done, and regardless, I mean, just literally having a white paper, if that, no project, and never did anything. So I'm, as a builder, as a co-founder, we said, like, no way, we're never going to do an ICO, right? Because that was such a horrible thing. On the other hand, what you speak about is, it is difficult, one, as a minority to raise money, definitely. And two, this is a different space. So you do not hold the IP, right? It's like, we are like, our project is open source, so typically VC wouldn't necessarily go for open source, right? And so there are so many other things involved. This is, we have to develop all of it, right? It's not just, we have to create new monetization models, new funding models, and hopefully we get beyond the fact, like, is it a female, is it a male, is it all these kind of things. I wanted to say something about also Jenny's assumption that trust would be raised. Yes, for legacy people, probably the trust would be raised if government is there and works hard. But again, if you come from a already group of people for who government hasn't worked, trust is not raised, right? That's the whole idea. We are replacing trust. DeFi is, the ultimate goal is replacing trust. You do not need to trust, right? Bad actors are disincentivized. Is the technology there? Besides Bitcoin is there, and there are lots of interesting projects, but the more complex DeFi world so far, yes, there's definitely still a lot of room for improvement. But generally, for me, I would like to get away from having to trust, and smart contracts can be audited, and there can be reputation systems and all that kind of stuff. That is really what we're working for, right? It's not like to have the government again in the middle and saying, oh, this is good, and you can do this, and you have to be an approved investor, and you have to do this, that, and the other. Instead of being an approved investor, you could get a license. Maybe you're 20, maybe and you get that license because you're actually so knowledgeable, and maybe you're 40 and you don't get the license because you just don't know anything, but you have the amount of money that today would qualify you as an investor, right? There are all these hurdles, and we can just turn that system upside down and create at least something that's an alternative. It doesn't have to replace the old system, but it could be an alternative.
I guess to that point of, disintermediating trust, while I agree that that's kind of the, motivation behind any decentralized technology, we are also seeing, centralized exchanges pop up, and we have the Coinbases of the world, the Krakens of the world. We have, other kind of custody solutions out there. So I guess a question for everyone on this panel: are we, just replacing one group of wealthy people with another set of wealthy people, or are we actually seeing redistribution of wealth happening in the crypto blockchain space?
But Coinbase isn't. Those are like centralized exchanges, like Donna taught us already. Those are not. That's not what we're talking about, right? This is like basically the intersection coming from legacy into crypto is regulated, right? The on and off ramps are regulated. That's fine. Once you get into the other space, though, that's a different playing field, right? Sorry.
So I think that, depending upon who is the player that has certain kinds of requirements, and Jenny can speak to this better, that they have certain fiduciary responsibilities, they may not at this current time now be able to participate in a more decentralized environment. So that's why you see people wanting to be on exchanges that are more centralized, or that they can't themselves under the mandate of their fund or other kinds of areas that they do asset management in, buy directly Bitcoin and custody Bitcoin themselves. So I think it depends at this moment. We're in great transition. And one of the key components that governs many of the players is custody, because it's a very well-defined kind of global requirement. And so I think that, over time, there may be other custody solutions that the DeFi world can have that stands up to the regulatory requirements of many of these institutions.
I think in terms of what you were talking about, the wealth, or it appearing to be, there was a recent article published in Forbes, and it was the billionaires that Bitcoin created, which strangely looked like the billionaires that already were there before Bitcoin created them. So when you have storylines like that, it appears that little has changed in terms of money on that scale. So, when you're talking about an area like the crypto world or DeFi, whatever, which does not have something that the real world has, which is marketing, the marketing that speaks for the crypto world is what we see when we see things like that. We see billionaires. We see the same white males, like she said. We see white male billionaires. We see billionaires who were billionaires that we knew of before that they even got there. So on certain levels, you'll have a group of people who are not going to trust what is happening because they see the same storyline. They see the same storyline being perpetuated. I think it would be a lot more exciting if they saw some women billionaires or some people of color billionaires, and they might say, hey, yes, maybe this is something different. But right now, it doesn't look much different than the current financial system that we have.
There is a lot to be said about that. I do think there are, I don't want to keep talking about it, but there are a lot of nerd millionaires now. I think billionaires is a thing. It's like, I do believe though that crypto has the opportunity. Like if you look at, not all of it, of course, but if you look at Bitcoin over time to be distributed, right? Not now, but there are the miners. There are, yes, the initial people, of course. If they didn't throw out their hard drive too early, they actually have a good chunk of money that you wouldn't be able to just make when they were mining early, right? At a time where it wasn't worth anything. Those are a lot of the super whales right now. They weren't, just from a use case perspective, the billionaire, then billionaire, didn't have a reason to get into Bitcoin, right? They weren't there. But they get into Bitcoin today because now they can make more. That's true. They have the money to get in on a big foot like Elon Musk or something, right? But I do think that there was a whole other class of people coming in. But the question now is like, how can we distribute this? How can we make sure that people even know about it, right? There are tons of people that don't even know about it. Vitalik Buterin who founded Ethereum, he actually talked about this. He said, like, we should put Ether aside for people who have no clue yet, because they're going to be disadvantaged, And it's probably a very small amount of people who in the world who even knows anything about it,
I think that's a really good point. Go ahead, Maggie.
One thing I'll say is, I guess, just the world we live on billionaires. I guess I don't imagine becoming a billionaire. I don't seek a billionaire as something that's super important to my ability to provide for myself. So what I think about when I'm thinking about DeFi and crypto, yes, like I was, still in college when like the Ethereum ICO happened. Obviously, I wasn't a man that had wealth to put in this thing. So but I do think though, like it's beyond that. It's making women and people who have been left out of the system, it's giving them that first empowerment point to feel like they do have more options to do things with their money, and they can do these things. And it's not just for bankers, and it's not in this place called Wall Street. So, while we all may not be billionaires, or, I don't even think most people want that. They want to feel like they can control their money and have that a little bit more control on their life. And there's so much more beyond that type of wealth. There's a different type of wealth to help people just become somewhat more happier and somewhat more knowledgeable and empowered in ways that it's not a money thing. It's like a self-value thing, because you've empowered somebody to make these choices that they didn't have before, which I think is like at least why I'm doing SheFi. Billionaires would be cool, but it's not really the way I've ever necessarily viewed why I'm in this ecosystem, even though I do financial stuff with it.
And we can build systems that actually work for us, that are not rigged against a particular group of people, right? Because every group can build systems. It's not so much about the money. It's also about the money, of course, but it's really about building systems that work. And we have an advantage because we know the systems that don't work for us, right? And we have another reason to go there earlier, sooner than the people for who the system works, right? It's that easy. And so we are privileged to, have the tools and to be there and all this. And we can extend our privilege to, other people who are in those places that really, in those communities also who need it.
Yeah, I think I really like the term option that Maggie used. And I think it's a lot, subtle, but it's super important that right now these financial systems or DeFi systems provide you the option that you didn't have before, provide you the access to certain kinds of financial products that you might not have had before. And that's, talking more about freedom, less about, money per se. But I think if I was incorrect about us running out of time before, I think I'm correct now. And so we are running out of time, but I do want to do a quick round of just call to action, like a single call to action or a single takeaway from each of our panelists today before we wrap up.
The thing I hear most often is, oh my God, this started, I'm too late. But that's not true at all. It's just starting. And so I think that everybody has the opportunity to read a little, to reach out, to learn a little bit, and to get involved. And so now is the time. And don't worry about that. It's been going on for 10 years. It's just been going on slowly for 10 years. So I think now's there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I think even if DeFi doesn't take off during my lifetime, and I think I will, but I hope it has inspired and showed the world that the future of financial services should be and what it could be like. I think what people can do is to always have a backup to your financials, whether it be opening another account with different banks, holding cash, holding your Bitcoin, or even putting some into DeFi.
I just want to take away, and like I said, with education, because I think that's probably the single most important thing that's necessary if you want to create an equitable environment. Education is really, really, really important. And I think that we need to support organizations and support, people who are out there who are doing that, because that's going to be the bridge between the technology and the people.
These are all great call to actions, and I'm very much on the same page. I like to say, instead of be the change you want to see in the world, like do the change you want to see in the world. So like try, if you feel comfortable with some of these platforms, or talk to your friends about it, or, do educational courses, whatever it is. But like I'm just a doer. So I was like, I'm just going to do this. And so if you are enabled in any way to continue empowering other people by doing things in the crypto space, just do it.
And yes, extend your privilege. We are all privileged. We are there. We had heard about this early. We have all skills, and everybody who's already in there for the longest time or short time, it doesn't really matter. If you're interested, get in. Everybody has something to contribute. If you're already in the scene, think about how you can bring other people in, right? It's us who are creating that fabric of the society of the future.
Love those call to actions. And I think what I would say is follow these amazing women on this panel. They're doing some amazing work. Join Maggie's Shipa group, join Tessie's Women in Blockchain, my Women in Blockchain group. There are tons of opportunities there. And it's just a matter of you grabbing them. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. And
thank you for moderating.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.